The night began like any other at the 7-Eleven where I work the graveyard shift. My name is Melissa, and I thought I'd seen it all, from the late-night drunks to the early morning rush of cab drivers. But nothing could have prepared me for what was about to unfold. It was around 2 a.m. when he entered, a man, cloaked not just in the darkness of the night, but in the palpable tension that immediately filled the air. He locked the door behind him, and with a cold, steady voice, announced that no one would be leaving. The security cameras, he revealed with a twisted pride, had already been taken care of. My heart raced, but my years behind the counter had taught me to keep a cool head. There were 4 others in the store with me, a young couple who had been arguing over chips, a weary truck driver stacking up on coffee, and a quiet man, lost in a book until that moment. The masked figure, his weapon a silent promise of violence, demanded our phones, and then, surprisingly, started what he called his experiment. He said that he knows about our darkest secrets. He knows what we fear, what we hold back, the sins of our pasts, and the worries that we hide with a smile every day. He then added that he would ask each of us some questions that cut to the core of who we were, or who we had been. He already knows the answers, but do we have the courage to say it in front of the others? He said that he carries a mic which is broadcasting their conversation directly to the radio station channel and being heard by thousands. There was just one rule. If we lie, we die. To the young woman, he asked, "What is the lie that you live every day?" Her eyes, filled with tears, met mine before she confessed to cheating on her husband with 3 other men. To her partner, he posed, "What have you taken that was not yours to take?" The man's face drained of color as he admitted, for the first time, to a hit and run he had committed in his youth, a secret he carried like a chain around his neck. The truck driver was next. "Whose life did you ruin without ever looking back?" With a heavy sigh, he revealed the story of a family business he had sabotaged to save his own, unaware of the downward spiral it caused them, leading to their suicide. And to the quiet man, engrossed in his book until our collective nightmare began, the question was, "What truth do you hide behind your silence?" His reply was the most shocking. A confession to embezzling funds from the non-profit he worked for, driven by desperation and shame. As each secret spilled into the open, the air in the store became heavier, suffocating. It was a psychological striptease, each revelation stripping away the layers of pretense until nothing but raw, painful truths remained. Then, it was my turn. "What are you most afraid of?" he asked me, his voice a blade that seemed to slice through the very fabric of my being. I thought of lying, of conjuring some trivial fear, but the weight of the confessions around me pressed me down, and I found myself speaking my truth.
A fear of dying without ever having truly lived, trapped in a cycle of monotony and unfulfilled dreams.
The shooter, his identity still masked, nodded, as if each confession was a piece to a puzzle only he could see. As the night dragged on, the boundary between captor and captives blurred, our secrets binding us in a macabre camaraderie. But as dawn approached, with the police surely on their way, a palpable sense of urgency took hold. It was clear this experiment was nearing its climax, and the masked figure promised one final revelation that would change everything. The tension in the air was thick as we awaited the final act of this twisted drama. The man who had terrorized us, who had peeled back the layers of our lives with his probing questions, seemed almost calm now, as if the culmination of his experiment was at hand. He turned to face us, the gun no longer the focal point of his presence. "You have all revealed truths tonight," he began, his voice eerily steady. "But the greatest revelation is yet to come." My heart pounded in my chest, the fear and anticipation mingling into a potent cocktail that made my head spin. What more could he possibly want from us? We had laid bare our darkest secrets, our deepest shames. What more was there to reveal? Then, with a flourish, he removed his mask, and the room went silent. The face that stared back at us was not that of a monster, but of a man we all recognized. Professor Gladwell, a respected figure in the community and a renowned psychologist. "The real experiment," he said, his eyes alight with a fervor that bordered on madness, "was to see if, when faced with extreme stress and the threat of violence, people would reveal truths they normally keep hidden, and you all passed with flying colors." The room erupted in chaos, the revelation too much to process. The young couple clung to each other, the truck driver shouted in disbelief, and the quiet man simply stared, his eyes wide with shock. Gladwell continued, undeterred by their reactions. "Fear," he declared, "is the most powerful motivator. It strips away the facade, revealing the essence of who we truly are." But before he could continue, the sound of sirens pierced the early morning calm, and within moments the store was swarming with police. Gladwell made no attempt to flee or resist. Instead, he surrendered with a smile, as if this was the ending he had envisioned all along. In the aftermath, as we gave our statements and the reality of our ordeal began to sink in, I felt a strange sense of clarity. Gladwell's experiment had been unethical, a violation on so many levels, but it had also forced me to confront a truth I had long denied. I didn't want to be a clerk forever, living in a fear of a life unlived. The trial that followed was a media sensation. Gladwell was deemed mentally unfit to stand trial and was committed to a mental institution, his career and reputation in ruins. The hostages, myself included, were hailed as victims of a madman's game, our personal revelations overshadowed by the sensational nature of the case. But for me, the experience marked a turning point. I quit my job at the 7-Eleven, went back to school, and pursued my dream of becoming a writer. And though the memories of that night still haunt me, they also serve as a reminder of the strength I found in the face of fear. Gladwell's experiment was meant to expose our weaknesses, but instead, it revealed a resilience I never knew I had. And while I can never forgive him for what he did, I can't help but wonder if, in some twisted way, he gave me the push I needed to finally start living. The night at the 7-Eleven will forever be etched in my memory, not just as a tale of survival, but as the moment I stopped being a victim of my fears and started to confront them head-on. I remember the day it all began with a clarity that still haunts me. A day like any other in the sun-soaked skies of California. My name is Kiara, and until the events I'm about to recount, my life was remarkably, raunchy. I was an OnlyFans model, a career choice that drew as much criticism as it did adoration, but it allowed me to express myself and connect with people in ways I never thought possible, and find new adventures from the comfort of my bedroom. That was until I received a request from an anonymous subscriber that would unravel the very fabric of my reality. The request was peculiar, yet intriguing, to mimic poses from ancient paintings while wearing a revealing outfit. The subscriber, who went by the moniker The Painter, offered a substantial sum for my compliance. I was used to handling weirder requests, so I didn't think much about it. The first pose was from a painting I recognized immediately, Botticelli's The Birth of Venus. I had taken an art course in college. It felt strange positioning my body to mirror the goddess of love. The requests grew stranger, each painting older and more obscure than the last, and with each new request, the sum which I was being paid jumped as well, first by a few $100s, and then by a few thousand. But I noticed that with every pose I recreated, an inexplicable chill crept into my apartment. When I posed about a woman with a flower vase behind her, a vase of flowers I had kept behind me suddenly flew off and smashed on the wall. Then came the whispers, soft at first, like the rustling leaves. They grew in intensity each night, speaking in a strange language I couldn't understand, but felt it in my bones. My sleep also became fitful. I would suddenly wake up in the middle of the night, plagued by the dreams of a dark-skinned woman whose body is twisted in an unnatural form, curled from the waist and hands thrown around with dislocated shoulders. She would hum a wail that resembled the moans of a dying whale. And then she would suddenly start weeping blood from her dark eyes, after which I would wake up, panting and covered in sweat. The realization hit me one evening as I set up for another photo. The paintings, the poses, there seemed to be a connection between them. Each one seemed like a piece of a larger, more sinister puzzle. In my naivety, I had probably stepped into something darker. But every time a doubt would linger in my mind, I would suddenly be offered a few thousand extra dollars. The painter, it seemed, could read my mind just by seeing the expression on my face. He had me, and he definitely didn't want to let me go. Desperate for answers, I scoured the internet for information about the painter. My search led me to a decades-old legend about a reclusive artist who, shunned by the world for his unsettling, dark, and gory works, finally sought immortality through his paintings. He was rumored to have made a pact with dark forces before suddenly vanishing, offering his soul in exchange for the power to trap the essence of life itself on canvas. The realization chilled me to my core. I was not just mimicking poses, I was completing rituals that summoned these spirits into my home. The final request arrived on a night when the air in my apartment hung heavy, charged with anticipation. I was getting paid $100,000 for it, the kind of money no one in my family had ever seen before. The painter asked for a recreation of a painting I could not find in any records, a portrait of a woman whose eyes seemed to weep blood, her form twisted in an agony of either ecstasy or torment. It was impossible to tell which. As I prepared to mimic the pose, a dread unlike any other filled me. The whispers crescendoed into a cacophony. The shadows in my apartment expanded into forms that were almost human. I realized then that I was not alone, and never had been since the first photo I uploaded. The horror of my situation was complete, but it was the truth behind the painter that would unravel the last threads of my sanity. The truth was as cold and unforgiving as the shadows that now danced freely in my once peaceful apartment. He said that as an artist, he got so consumed by his craft that he crossed into the realm of the occult, seeking to capture not just the image of his subjects, but their very souls. His name was lost to time, but his legacy would live on. As I stood in my living room, the air thick with the presence of the unseen, I had a feeling that the final pose was not just another ritual. It was the culmination of them all, the key to unlocking whatever darkness the painter had contracted. But the $100,000 were on my mind, the things I could buy, finally gift a car to my father. With trembling hands, I set my camera to capture the pose, my heart heavy with the knowledge that I was about to complete a cycle that began long before I was born. I struck the pose, mirroring the twisted agony of the woman in the painting, and at that moment, the apartment seemed to sigh, a sound so full of sorrow and relief that it was almost human. The camera clicked, and the shadows surged forward, enveloping me in darkness. I braced myself for the end, for the cold embrace of whatever lay beyond. But the end did not come. Instead, the shadows receded, and the whispers faded, leaving behind a silence so profound it rang in my ears. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time since the painter had entered my life. I rushed to my computer, but the painter was gone, disappeared while I received the message of a transfer of $100,000. In the days that followed, my life returned to a semblance of normality, but the peace, as I always knew in my heart, was going to be short-lived. The twist in my tale, the truth that haunts me to this very day, came unexpectedly. A week later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find no one there, just a small box at my foot. I took it to the kitchen counter and opened it carefully to find a note which said thank you. But what accompanied it was an image that shook me to my bones. It was my final picture, as I posed in a twisted form in a revealing outfit to mimic the last painting which I had received. But right behind me was a naked, dark-skinned woman with eyes that wept blood, her form twisted, not in agony, but in relief. It was a portrait of me, but I never realized that this spirit, this soul behind me, finally escaped into the real world. I am Kiara, a model from California who once sought connection through the digital world, only to find herself entwined in a centuries-old narrative of art, obsession, and the quest for freedom. My apartment is quiet now, the shadows nothing more than the absence of light, but sometimes, when the sun sets and the world quiets, I can hear the faint echo of a brush against canvas or slight breaths on my neck. It was probably 2 a.m. when I got her text. Clara wants to send you a message on Instagram. A notification had popped up. I was on the verge of dozing off when the alert made me open one eye. She had replied to my story with a laughing emoji, and that was it. Nothing more. But something about her picture caught my attention. I had seen that face before, an above-waist shot in a burgundy crop top, smiling at the camera while posing on what looked like a beach. Yes, she had apparently been on a like spree a few weeks ago. You know, one where someone keeps on liking all of your images back to back. Did she want to grab my attention? I had thought, but forgot about it. But when I received her text that night, I didn't know if I was supposed to respond. How do you even respond to an emoji? So I just replied with a smiley. This time, her response came back in seconds.
You don't remember me, do you?
Was I supposed to? She was incredibly gorgeous. She seemed a little short in height, but her affable smile pretty much didn't let you focus on it. Round spectacles adorned her oval face, and her dark, dense hair with casual brown highlights complemented her pale skin. She had a few of her pictures amidst a gallery of beautiful shots of nature and animals and shoes, but her face didn't ring any bells.
Vegas, silly.
I jumped. Yes, I had been to Vegas 3 months ago, but that was a trip with my friends. Last I checked, she wasn't one. I seriously had no idea who she was, so I immediately searched for her Facebook profile to check for any mutual friends, but failed to find it. She has a pretty common name, so I scrolled back through her pictures on Instagram, and surprisingly enough, she had posted snaps of her vacation in Vegas at around the same time that I was there. Weird.
You're not one of those guys, are you?
Did we meet in Vegas?
You're kidding, right?
Bewildered, I checked her profile bio. Delaware future lawyer, past nerd, presently preparing to conquer the world. She had about 1,700 followers, followed about 120. Seemed like a genuine profile, but I had no idea who she was. I'm sorry, but I seriously doubt that we've met before.
June 30, around midnight, Omnia. Remember?
Holy crap, I was actually there that night. Omnia in Caesar's Palace is one of the most popular nightclubs of Vegas, but I still didn't remember her. Yeah?
You were with your friends, that fat one hit on my bestie, bouncers came.
Yes, my friend Dick was being a dick to these girls, but we sorted things out. They actually joined us afterwards, but I still didn't remember her. Yeah, but I'm pretty sure you weren't one of them.
You're kidding, right? Remember, you're still not over your girlfriend's mysterious death?
This was it. No way, not even my closest friends were aware of it. I had left my hometown 2 years ago to build a new life after my girlfriend was found. Well, let's just say that there was no way she could have known. Who are you? How do you know this?
You told me, in Vegas. You weren't even that drunk. Anyway, just wanted to let you know. Thought we could reconnect, but clearly you don't want to.
No, I was pretty sure that I did not meet her at any point of time, neither in Vegas nor even in my freaking dreams. So I did what any sane guy would. I took a Snapchat of her pic and sent it to my friend Dick, but even he didn't remember seeing that woman. My memory wasn't betraying me. I had never met that woman in my life. But then how on earth did she know about my girlfriend's mysterious death? I got back to her a few minutes later. Okay, this is crazy, but there is no way on earth that I would forget meeting someone.
It's fine. This must be really random for you. I understand.
But how do you know all that stuff?
Because, well, we spoke with each other for a while before your group separated. Remember?
Okay, there's no way I could have told you about my girlfriend.
Or you were drunk, beyond your senses. LOL. Blackout?
I closed my phone, threw it on the bed, almost died as I saw it making an abnormal bounce and landing just short of the edge. But I couldn't bloody remember meeting her at all. She wasn't in that group of girls. I could have been mistaken, but she had narrated almost all the details of that night with absolute accuracy, and yet she was never there. Something was wrong. And that is when I remembered. My girlfriend's middle name was Clara. The phone buzzed again. I opened Instagram again and saw that she had sent an image.
Found this.
It was a pic which made my head swirl. It was a pic which made me sick to the stomach. It was a pic which made me rub my eyes more than a dozen times. She had casually clicked my picture that night outside of Caesar's hotel. Same jacket, same shoes, same glasses. But in my glasses, I saw her reflection, which sent a wave of shivers down my spine. Her high cheekbones, her thin lips, her sharp jawline, her dark hair, her hazel eyes. It was my girlfriend whom I had buried with my own hands. I opened her profile again, and in all the images of Clara, I saw my smiling, beautiful dead girlfriend. As tears ran down my eyes, she texted me again.
I miss you on this side, boo.
The first night on the job at Greenways promised nothing out of the ordinary. Just a routine shift that my friend Stuart and I hoped would pass quickly with banter and the occasional restocking. The store, with its sprawling aisles filled with everything from fresh produce to canned goods, gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Our laughter echoed through the empty store, filling it with life, as we made light of the typical graveyard shift stories. "Ghostly customers checking out at midnight," Stuart joked, pushing a cart along. I laughed, playing along with tales of spectral cashiers. The first sign that the night wouldn't be as mundane as we'd hoped was the cold draft that swept through aisle 5, chilling us to the bone. We exchanged puzzled looks, scanning the closet doors and windows for any sign of a breach, finding none. An uneasy silence fell between us, broken only by the faint, directionless whispering that seemed to emanate from the very shelves we were stocking. The sound was barely there, like the sigh of a distant wind, but unmistakably present. It was unsettling how quickly our laughter died, replaced by a growing sense of dread. Someone was there, so we split up, walkie-talkies in hand. Stuart ventured into the back storerooms while I took to the aisles. The plan was simple: check for any signs of a break-in, or perhaps a faulty HVAC system. Anything to explain the draft and the whispers. No sooner had I taken a few steps into the first aisle, a can of soup tumbled off the shelf behind me, followed by a box of cereal, then another, and another. I spun around, half expecting to catch a glimpse of some prankster, but there was only emptiness. My heart raced. It was then Stuart's scream pierced the night, a raw, agonizing sound that cut through the walkie-talkie. "Stuart!" I shouted into the device. "Talk to me, man!" But there was no reply, just the crackle of static. Panic set in as I raced towards the storerooms. Finding Stuart's walkie-talkie abandoned on the cold tile was a moment of pure horror. My calls for him went unanswered as well. It must have taken me 15 minutes before I spotted Stuart at the end of an aisle. Relief flooded through me. I called his name, but he didn't respond. I walked up to him, but he didn't seem to be looking at me. It was when I touched him that his face turned, but he seemed numb, unable to hear me. I must have turned for just a moment, but when I looked back, he seemed to have vanished into thin air. My heart was a drumbeat of terror as I stood frozen. I just turned and sprinted towards the security office. But as I entered inside, I saw Stuart, calm as if nothing had happened, munching on a donut. I asked him about the screaming and the disappearance, but he seemed oblivious. "I took her around and came back here. I never ran into you." Impossible. But when he produced his walkie-talkie, I froze. Then whom did I see? Before I could grapple further with the impossibility of the situation, the entire store plunged into darkness. The security monitors flickered with static before coming back to life. A shriek, bone-chilling in its intensity, filled the air, its source untraceable yet ominously close. Our eyes were drawn to the monitors, where a shadowy figure moved with purpose through the aisles, its form beast-like. Panic surged as the realization hit us. The entity, the source of the night's horrors, was real, and it was coming for us. The figure on the screen seemed to defy the laws of physics, its movements jerky and unnatural, as if it were a creature of another realm forced into our reality. We watched, transfixed in horror as it drew closer, the cameras nearest us flickering out one by one. We ran and it chased us. Its form was a swirling vortex of shadows. The store transformed into a labyrinth of terror, each turn an aisle a potential trap as we fled the relentless pursuit of the enraged spirit. That is when Gerald, the security guard, appeared out of nowhere, clutching an ancient silver talisman. With a strength and resolve that belied his age, he confronted the entity, the talisman growing brightly in his hand. The light seemed to repel the darkness, creating a barrier that the entity couldn't cross. Seizing the opportunity, Gerald ushered us toward the exit. Once outside, under the safety of the night sky, Gerald shared the grim tale of the land upon which Greenways stood. A cemetery, centuries old, had been disturbed during the store's construction, its graves desecrated, the resulting place of countless souls upturned. Among them was a spirit, powerful and vengeful, awakened by the violation of its grave, now seeking retribution against the living. The realization that our night of horror was rooted in a history of disrespect and desecration was a weighty one. The store, its gleaming aisles and modern facade, could not erase the sanctity of the ground it occupied. Gerald's intervention had saved us, but the knowledge that many spirits still lingered, bound to the site of their unrest, was a haunting thought that would linger far longer. As dawn broke, painting the sky with streaks of light, Stuart and I watched the store from a distance, its windows now just mirrors reflecting the morning sun. The horrors of the night were over, but the experience had changed us, a stark reminder of the past's enduring presence and the unseen worlds that brush against our town. In the end, Greenways remained a beacon in the community. But for Stuart and me, it was a monument to the unseen, and a reminder that some things, once disturbed, demanded to be acknowledged, their stories heard and respected. Our night shift at Greenways was over, but the echoes of the past would whisper through its aisles long after we were gone.
My name is Stephanie, and I volunteer at a local library. One day, I found a phone nestled between a discarded newspaper and a worn-out chair in the quietest corner of the place. It was an ordinary smartphone, slightly scuffed around the edges. Whoever it belonged to probably forgot it there. The head librarian had left, taking the keys with her, so I kept the phone with myself. in case the owner called. But that night, as I lay in bed scrolling through the phone's gallery, hoping to find a clue about its owner, who appeared to be a fantastic photographer, I suddenly found an image of me. Me at a cafe. It shook me. As I scrolled further, I found more of them. Me walking through a park, and then a railway station, and then at the airport. The pics were always taken from a distance. A chill ran down my spine, but rationality told me there must be a reasonable explanation. Or did I have a stalker? But as the night grew deeper, the new photos appeared, escalating in their intimacy and terror. One showed me sleeping soundly in my bed, a vantage point impossible without someone else in the room. Another captured me in the shower, the steam swirling around an obscured figure reflected in the mirror. My heart pounded against my ribcage. How could someone take these photos without me noticing? Amid my growing panic, I noticed a folder marked "Secret," protected by a passcode. My attempts to guess it were futile. It was then another photo appeared. This one different. It was of the phone itself, lying on my kitchen table with a 4-digit code scrawled beneath it. I didn't understand how these pics were magically appearing, but with trembling fingers, I entered the code into the phone. What I found in the secret folder was a digital rabbit hole leading me straight into the life of a man obsessed with fear. The phone belonged to a recently deceased local photographer renowned for his unnerving ability to capture pure terror in his subjects. Newspapers had mentioned an unfinished project, a series of photographs meant to explore the thin veil between life and death. My mind raced, piecing together the unsettling truth. This wasn't just a phone. It was something bigger. But why me? Why were these photos appearing now? As the night bled into the darker hours, the presence I'd sensed through the phone began to seep into the very walls of my apartment. It started with the mirrors. Each reflection seemed to harbor a shadow that wasn't mine, a silhouette of a man with a camera perpetually aimed as if waiting for the perfect shot of my escalating fear. Windows, too, became frames for the spectral photographer's glimpses, catching me off guard with fleeting images of his figure, always just out of focus, always chillingly silent. Sleep became a distant memory as my nights were invaded by nightmares, where flashes of light chased me through endless corridors. It was as if the photographer, even in death, was continuing his final, ghastly project through me, making me the subject of a gallery I never wished to be a part of. Driven by a mix of terror and determination, I resolved to end this. I tried everything to destroy the phone, smashing it, drowning it, and even burning it, but each attempt was in vain. The phone remained unscathed, as if protected by some unseen force. The photos began to change then, no longer content with capturing my fear. They showed places, dark and decrepit locations that sent shivers down my spine with their mere appearance. Each was linked to the photographer's life and his mysterious, untimely death. Clues, I realized, to a puzzle I was being compelled to solve. Was his spirit seeking justice or revenge? Then one night, it rang. A video call from an unknown number. Hesitation gripped me, every instinct screaming to ignore it, but the need for answers pushed me to accept the call. The screen flickered to life, revealing the interior of a room I recognized from one of the haunting photos. And there, in the dim light, stood the photographer, his skin pale, almost translucent. Behind him, arrayed like trophies, were photos. Photos of many women, their eyes wide with the terror as well. His voice, when it came, was a whisper, yet it filled the room, filled my mind with a chilling clarity.
You are the last one, the final piece.
I understood then. This wasn't just about capturing fear or even about his untimely death. It was some kind of ritual, one that needed a final living subject to complete. His death had been no accident. It was a sacrifice, one that he now sought to replicate with me. Panic and clarity warred within me as I realized the truth. The phone wasn't just a medium for his hauntings. It was the anchor, keeping him tethered to this world, allowing him to complete his ghastly project. And I, the last subject, was the key to either his ultimate masterpiece or his banishment. With the ghost's eyes boring into mine through the screen, a plan formed, desperate and dangerous. If the phone was the anchor, then it was the key to breaking his hold over me and the others he tormented. Channeling every ounce of willpower, I directed my gaze back at him, at the camera, and forced a smile. "You want fear?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "Then you're looking at the wrong subject." I put on a smile, a big smile, and immediately he was rattled. My room's windows started shaking and mirrors started shattering. I was scared, but somehow I was managing a smile. He yelled an ungodly cry from the other side, and even my bed started shaking. Frames were falling off, chairs were sliding, but I kept smiling from ear to ear. And then, everything stopped. Silence. The call was disconnected. My pictures were gone, and so was the secret folder. The harrowing night finally came to its end.
The night I decided to follow the mysterious man from the 7-Eleven, my life changed forever. It was a decision born out of curiosity, a need to understand why, every month at exactly 8 p.m., this stranger would come in and purchase 3 seemingly unrelated items: a lighter, a pack of salt, and a single candle. My colleagues had told me tales of his visits, how they coincided with unexplained power outages and a chill that would sweep through the store. The man always came once every 30 days, bought his stuff, then met the shady store manager in his office and left. My colleagues joked about it, but their laughs never quite reached their eyes. I was the new guy, Lou, the one who hadn't yet learned to stay behind the counter and mind my own business. On that fateful night, I watched as he made his purchases and walked out into the dark. My curiosity got the better of me, and I followed him, keeping my distance as we ventured deeper into the heart of the town. The streets were deserted, the only sound of my footsteps echoing against the pavement and the distant howl of the wind. He led me to the outskirts of town, to a clearing that I never knew existed. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie light over the scene. The man began some sort of ritual, arranging the items he had bought in a precise pattern on the ground. He started chanting in a strange, ancient language I couldn't understand, his voice steady and mesmerizing. It could have well been Old Spanish or native Indian lingo, but I was clueless to it. I hid behind a tree, watching, my heart racing with a mix of fear and excitement. Then, I made a mistake. I stepped on a branch and it snapped under my foot with a sound that shattered the silence like glass. The man turned sharply, his eyes finding mine in the darkness. There was a flash of anger, and then a profound sadness. I don't know how he did it, but he just vanished before my eyes, leaving me alone in the clearing, the chill of the night suddenly more biting than before. I didn't understand what I had done, but I felt it in my bones, a mistake that had irrevocable consequences. I hurried back to the 7-Eleven, my mind racing, trying to convince myself it was all a product of my imagination. But the town had changed. Shadows moved with a life of their own, whispering threats and voices only I could hear. The streetlights flickered as I passed, plunging me into darkness before flaring back to life. I felt like I was being hunted, chased by something I had inadvertently unleashed. I made it back to the 7-Eleven, panting and drenched in sweat. But the store was different, the air thick with an unspoken terror. My colleagues were gone, and in their place were shadows that watched me with hungry eyes.
I barricaded myself in the office, panicking, and that is when I heard my manager's voice, who was sitting alone in the dark. He spoke of a guardian, a being that protected our town from something ancient and malevolent. The items the man bought were part of a ritual to keep the darkness at bay, a ritual I had interrupted. As he spoke further, the reality of my situation sank in. I was alone, in a town overrun by nightmares, with no knowledge of how to reverse what I had done. The night stretched on, an endless parade of horrors that tested the limits of my sanity. Shadows whispered my name, and black formless creatures of darkness pressed against the windows, their red eyes gleaming with malice. I was in a living nightmare, and dawn seemed an eternity away. The night wore on, each minute stretching into what felt like hours, as I huddled in the cramped office of the 7-Eleven with the manager, whose quiet and aloofness we had all taken for being strange and shady. And then I learned his reason. He was aware of the darkness, the mysterious man and his rituals. He held all of these secrets inside of him. And then something happened. A tall shadow entered inside, and with swiftness rushed to the manager. He convulsed, his eyes rolled up, and he was lifted off his feet into the air, possessed. I was freaking out, but the manager fought the evil, yelling the same thing on repeat, almost like a mantra. Light repels the darkness. It seemed overly simplistic, but desperation lends weight to even the most cliché of adages. I remembered the items the mysterious man always bought: a lighter, a pack of salt, and a candle. They were tools of protection, elements to ward off whatever now lurked in the shadows. Armed with this knowledge, I ran to the store, picked up a lighter, a candle, and salt. With these items in hand, I set about to the room, my hands trembling as I placed the candle in the center of and circled it with salt, just like I had seen that mysterious man do. The moment I lit the candle, the oppressive darkness seemed to recoil, and my manager fell back on his feet. The whispers grew frantic, angry, and the shadows at the window surged forward, only to be repelled by the barrier of salt. It was working, but I knew it was a temporary measure. The candle would not burn forever, and the salt could not hold back the darkness indefinitely. That is when I received a text from an unknown number which spoke of a heart of light and words of sealing. For some reason, I knew exactly the man who had sent it. I interpreted this as needing to strengthen the ritual's core, the candle's flame, with something personal. I took a deep breath, focusing on my desire to protect, to undo my mistake. Then, speaking words of apology and hope, I used my own breath to fan the flame. It was a shot in the dark, but the candle flared brightly as opposed to burning off. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The shadows screamed, a sound of fury and pain, as the light washed over them, dissolving them into nothingness. The whispers died away, and the darkness retreated, beaten back by a single candle's light. I maintained the ritual until the first light of dawn crept through the windows. As the sun rose, the normal sounds of the town returning felt like music to my ears. The darkness had been banished, the town saved from a night of terror, but the cost was etched deep into my soul. I stepped outside, the morning light warm on my face, a stark contrast to the cold dread of the night. The town looked the same, but I saw it with new eyes. I had faced the darkness, both the one I had unleashed and the one within myself. The mysterious man never returned to the 7-Eleven, and I never learned his name, but I kept up the ritual, month after month. It was my penitence, my responsibility now. The town remained safe under my watch, but I knew the darkness was always there, lurking at the edges, waiting for another chance to seep in. I realized later that the true horror wasn't the darkness of the creatures it hid. It was the ease with which a single act of curiosity could unravel the safety of an entire town. I was scarred, forever changed by a night of unspeakable terror, but I had survived.
And in that survival, I found a purpose.
My name is Elena, and what I encountered during my first night shift at a Florida Walmart still haunts my dreams. It was the lead up to the holiday season, yet the store was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the festive cheer that filled the air outside. I was assigned to restock shelves, a simple task, I thought, until I reached aisle 7. Aisle 7, with its array of toys, should have been a place of joy and laughter, but instead, it was the epicenter of unexplained phenomena that had both staff and shoppers whispering in hushed tones. Toys were found scattered off their shelves. An inexplicable chill surrounded you as soon as you walked there. And sometimes, if you listened closely, you'd hear the cries of a child. On that first night, as I approached the aisle, I thought that I saw a child staring at me from the distance. Odd hours, not many adults around. I worried that the child was lost. But as I went towards him, he disappeared. Another employee, sensing my confusion, casually remarked that it's Samuel. That is when I learned that a few years ago, the store was engulfed in a small fire. A woman was trapped in flames. Her boy ran and saved her, but suffocated in the smoke. This revelation cast a shadow over aisle 7. The joy it once held replaced by a lingering sorrow. The haunting grew more intense with each passing night. Toys hurled off shelves with unseen force, aimed directly at me. Spectral footprints appeared in the dust, leading nowhere, and Samuel's sobbing became a constant backdrop to my shift. While my colleagues largely ignored the obvious paranormal phenomenon, I somehow felt that he was reaching out to me, desperate to communicate. Driven by a mix of fear and determination, I resolved to understand Samuel's purpose, to find a way to help him find peace. As my shift drew to a close, Samuel's sobs echoed one last time down aisle 7. I knew then that I could not turn away and have to help this lost soul, no matter the cost. The next evening, I returned to Walmart with a dare. I would communicate with Samuel, reach out to him in a way that transcended the barriers between the living and the spirit trapped in sorrow. Armed with sacks of salt from the store shelves, I reached aisle 7. I researched about communicating with spirits online and found that salt acts as a powerful medium to bridge the gap. I punctured the sacks and spread the salt on the dark floor. The store was quieter than usual. The fluorescent lights flickered above, casting long shadows that seemed to dance at the edge of my vision. I called out to Samuel, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. Samuel, if you're here, I want to help you. Can you understand me? But nothing. I said it again, and this time, a toy truck flew off the shelf to my right. The air suddenly grew colder, and then the salt began to shift, forming words in response to my plea. His response was a single word, but it carried the weight of his longing and confusion. My eyes welled with tears as I realized the depth of his despair. Samuel didn't know he was gone, trapped in a world he no longer belonged to. Samuel, you're safe with me. I want to help you find peace. The salt shifted again, the grains moving with purpose. It was then I understood. Samuel was lost, not just in the afterlife, but in his understanding of his fate. He was searching for his mother, clinging to the hope that she could still save him. As we communicated, Samuel revealed his heart's desire. Before the fire, his mother had given him a ring. In his last moments, consumed by smoke and flames, he had lost it. He wanted his mother's ring. The revelation was a turning point. If the ring was the key to Samuel's unrest, then finding it was my mission. A coworker, intrigued by my late-night endeavors, shared a piece of forgotten lore. The store had been rebuilt, flooring had been done over the original. If the ring existed, it was hidden beneath us. Fueled by a newfound resolve, I enlisted the help of sympathetic coworkers. After hours, armed with tools borrowed from the hardware section, we began our dig beneath the store. The work was hard, the floor unyielding. but the thought of Samuel's soul finding peace drove us forward. Finally, our efforts bore fruit. Beneath layers of dust and debris, we found a ring, its metal warm against the cold ground. As I held it aloft, the store suddenly plunged into darkness, the lights flickering out, leaving us in an abyss of shadows. When the lights returned, the ring was gone from my hand, but so was the chilling presence that had haunted aisle 7. In its place was a warmth, a comforting feeling that enveloped us. The air was lighter, the shadows receded, and the oppressive atmosphere that had dominated the store was lifted. Samuel's sobbing, the laughter, and the cold drafts were gone. Aisle 7, once a sight of sorrow and fear, now felt just like any other part of the store. The toys lay in their places, untouched by unseen hands, the air free of the sound of weeping. As dawn broke, casting its light through the front windows of the store, I knew Samuel had found his peace. The ring, a symbol of a mother's love, had freed him, allowing his spirit to move on. The store, once a site of tragedy, now held a sense of calm, a testament to the power of compassion and determination. Walking out into the morning light, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The haunting of aisle 7 was over, and with it, my fear. Samuel's story, a tale of loss and longing, had reached its end, but the journey had changed me, taught me the strength of the human spirit and the unbreakable bonds of love.
New York City's skyline was a dazzling array of lights and dreams, a perfect backdrop for my life's latest chapter. I, Elena, had transformed from a struggling contemporary artist into a successful OnlyFans model. Who knew that the more clothes I'd drop, the more dollars I'd make? My high-rise apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows offered views that seemed surreal. Skyscrapers touching the skies, the hustle of the streets below, a stark contrast to the small, dimly lit shared flat I used to call home. The luxurious brands that now filled my closet, the exclusive parties I was invited to, and the sleek black car that awaited me downstairs. Struggling artists have done worse. But then I came across Adrien, and it changed everything. He was different than my other patrons. He never forced me to do questionable things. In fact, he liked me covered up. He said that he just wanted my company. It felt as if he saw through my facade. Within a week, he slid into my DMs, offering to sponsor my content exclusively for his eyes. It was accompanied by a transfer that dwarfed any income I had seen in months. The gesture was grand, yet it was his words that captivated me. A promise of no strings attached, an allure of something more profound than mere transactional support. Adrien was an enigma, wrapped in the mystery of his digital persona. What drew me to him was not just the financial freedom he offered, but the way he spoke, with a depth and understanding that seemed beyond the superficial interactions I was accustomed to. His messages were filled with references to art, literature, and a life that seemed both lavish and introspective. There was a vulnerability in his words, a reflection of my own insecurities and aspirations that made me feel seen, understood, and inexplicably connected to him. Our first meeting was set against the backdrop of an art gallery opening, a world I was familiar with yet had felt alienated from it in my recent life. My heart raced as I dressed for the occasion, slipping into a dress that felt like a piece of art itself, my reflection in the mirror, a stark reminder of the dual life I'd led. But when I got there, I was scared to find no one. And just when alarms started going off in my head as I heard a sound of glass shattering, in walked Adrien. Handsome, suave, kind eyes. He said that he wanted to surprise me, so he arranged a private tour a day before the opening. Oh God, who was this guy? As we walked through the gallery, Adrien shared stories behind each piece, his passion for art evident in his every word. We talked about the struggles of artists, the beauty of creation, and the masks people wear to shield their true selves. It was a conversation that flowed effortlessly, and then we came across an ornate mirror, an art installation titled Inwards. As we saw our reflections and spoke further, I felt a connection that was both exciting and dangerously intimate. That is where he grabbed me by my waist and kissed me passionately. I couldn't get him out of my mind that night as he dropped me home and left, and the next morning I woke up to the delivery of the same mirror, a gift worth $80,000. However, it soon gave way to unsettling occurrences. My reflection in the gifted mirror began to move independently, a chilling echo of my actions, yet distinctively separate. And then messages I didn't remember sending appeared in my OnlyFans inbox, their content eerily personal and revealing. These occurrences, increasingly bizarre and frightening, seemed to coincide with the deepening of my relationship with Adrien. He, with his enigmatic aura and profound understanding of my psyche, appeared to be the only one who could offer explanations. Yet his responses were cryptic, deepening the mystery that surrounded him. Adrien, the man who had entered my life with promises of support and understanding, now stood at the center of a whirlwind of doubt and fear, his true intentions as elusive as the shifting reflections in the ornate mirror he had gifted me. He was a walking red flag, yet there was something off about him which I couldn't put my finger on. As my relationship with Adrien evolved, so did the nature of his involvement in my life. He would come over to my apartment and watch me fall asleep. He began to dictate the content I posted, subtly at first, then with increasing assertiveness. He suggested changes in my appearance, asked for pictures and specific poses, and I never realized how he had slowly isolated me from the community I had built. Each suggestion was wrapped in the guise of caring, but the undercurrent of control was unmistakable. Soon, I was so much dependent on him that it hit me one day that I had destroyed my flourishing OnlyFans career. If Adrien screwed me, I would be back to my struggling days in no time. One day, when I suddenly woke up to find him in my room, staring at my reflection in the mirror that he had gifted, I lost it and confronted him. I expected anger, denial, perhaps even an apology, but his reaction was none of these. Instead, he challenged me to look inwards for answers, and that is when I realized that he wasn't actually in my room. Yet I could see his reflection in the mirror, getting up and approaching me. I panicked, but then in a moment that defied reality, his reflection touched the mirror and it gave away. The mirror, symbolic of the barrier between our worlds, shattered, its fragments reflecting the breakdown of the illusion Adrien had created. In the silence that followed, sanity hit me, and the truth revealed itself with a crushing clarity. Adrien had never existed outside my own psyche. He was a manifestation of my deepest desires, insecurities, and fears, a mirror image of my own soul. He was a persona my mind created in the bid to stop me from losing myself to the thing I was doing. I created his account. I sent myself messages from him. I asked myself to cover up and become exclusive so that I stop engaging with the 100 creeps I met on the internet every day. The glass shattering was me breaking into the gallery that night, and the mirror, I had used every bit of money that I earned from OnlyFans to buy it, only to break it and find my true self. The realization was as liberating as it was devastating, but I found my identity again. Now, as I sit in my therapist's office, recording these events as an exercise to come to terms that I am in the early stages of schizophrenia, I feel content. Yet, as I open my eyes, I can see Adrien, my mysterious, gorgeous therapist, going through my private pictures that I pretend to accidentally share to him. Yes, I could see the ring on his finger. But I also see him fidgeting his legs and beads of sweat dripping down his forehead. I see the way he stares at my body, and truth be told, I like it. These are great clicks.
Thank you. My ex took them. Too bad I don't have anyone to take my pictures in lingerie again.
Well, I was somewhat of a photographer in college.
Aw, Adrien, I don't want to bother you.
You couldn't, even if you try. And just like that, I invited him for a glass of wine, which he agreed to, without much thinking.
In the heart of Los Angeles, where dreams are as often made as they are shattered, I found myself standing at the gates of an opportunity that was as intimidating as it was exhilarating. My name is Rebecca, an aspiring actress who, between auditions and callbacks, found a peculiar yet promising way to make ends meet, babysitting for the elite of Hollywood. That evening, my services were required by James and Antonia, a power couple whose names graced the silver screen and the glossy pages of tabloids in equal measure. Their mansion, nestled in a lavish suburban enclave, was a testament to their success. As I drove up the winding driveway, the estate unfurled like a scene from a movie, its opulence unabashed and its secrets well guarded. The architecture was a blend of modernity and timelessness, with sprawling gardens that seemed to whisper tales of the past. The interior was no less impressive, with soaring ceilings, artworks that spoke of rich tastes and richer wallets, and a sense of grandeur that was almost overwhelming. James and Antonia greeted me with smiles that were polished, their demeanor as rehearsed as any script. They were charming, yet there was a distance in their eyes, a detachment that belied their warm words. They introduced me to their twin babies, angels in their cribs, before imparting the house rules. Among them, one was non-negotiable. The home office is off limits, James stated firmly, his gaze locking onto mine to punctuate the importance of this rule. I nodded, not daring to ask why. The couple left soon after, their departure as swift as their entrance. The house, in the absence of its masters, felt different, larger somehow, and filled with whispers of the lavish parties and silent screams of secret despair that had traversed its halls. I busied myself with caring for the twins, their laughter a welcome respite from the eerie silence that the mansion now harbored. As dusk turned to night, a transformation began. The mansion, a beacon of luxury by day, became a canvas for shadows by night. The walls, which had proudly displayed their opulent art, now seemed to close in, harboring darker tales. A cold draft meandered through the corridors, originating from nowhere yet felt everywhere, chilling me to the bone. It was then that the unexplained occurrences began. Shadows darted across the walls, not in tandem with any light or movement. An antique music box, its origin and location unknown, filled the halls with a haunting melody that seemed to have no beginning and no end. The twins, too, changed. Their babble turned into unison whispers, their voices unnaturally deep, their eyes fixated on something unseen, drawn inexplicably towards the forbidden office. I tried to convince myself that it was all a product of my imagination, a side effect of the mansion's intimidating beauty and the stories that lingered in its shadows. But as the night progressed, the bizarre events escalated, each new occurrence more unsettling than the last. The mansion, with all its luxuries, began to feel like a prison, its opulence a facade for something far more sinister lurking beneath. Caught between my responsibility for the twins and my growing fear, I found myself standing at a crossroads of curiosity and dread. The home office, with its forbidden allure, called to me. Despite the warnings, despite the fear that clenched at my heart, I felt an undeniable pull towards it, a compulsion to uncover the secrets that James and Antonia so fiercely guarded. Little did I know, my steps towards the office were the first into a night that would test the limits of my courage. unraveling horrors that lay hidden within the mansion's luxurious veneer. The truth behind the twins' bizarre behavior, the source of the cold drafts and shifting shadows, and the melody that haunted the halls were all threads in a tapestry of terror that I was about to unravel. The mansion's once comforting silence had transformed into a cacophony of whispers and shadows, each corner seeming to hold its breath, waiting for something sinister to unfold. As the twins' behavior grew increasingly bizarre, their once innocent eyes now mirrored depths I couldn't fathom, speaking in unison with voices that seemed to echo from another world. Their fixation on the forbidden office grew, as if an invisible string pulled their consciousness towards it, leaving their laughter hollow, their playtime forgotten. The night, draped in its velvet darkness, seemed to press against the windows, eager to penetrate the mansion with its unseen, watchful gaze. It was in this oppressive atmosphere that the unexplained occurrences began to escalate, each event more bizarre than the last. Shadows darted across the walls, not merely flickers of light, but as if they were entities, sentient and mocking, playing a game of hide and seek. A cold draft, persistent and unyielding, wound its way through the halls, emanating from empty rooms, its source as elusive as the shadows. But what unsettled me the most was the music box, its melody, haunting and beautiful, played on its own, filling the mansion with a tune that seemed to belong to another era. Despite my efforts, I couldn't locate the music box, its sound a ghostly serenade that had no discernible origin. As the night wore on, my unease turned into dread. The mansion, a labyrinth of luxury and hidden fears, seemed to close in on me. The air grew thicker, charged with a presence I couldn't see but felt, as tangible as the marble beneath my feet. This can't be happening. It's just a house, just kids. Focus, Rebecca, I whispered to myself, a futile attempt to dispel the growing terror. But the mansion and its inhabitants had other plans. The twins, now eerily quiet, stood at the threshold of the hallway, their eyes fixed on the office door, a silent challenge to the boundary I had been warned not to cross. Driven by a mix of concern for the children and a desperate need for answers, I made a decision that would alter the course of the night irreversibly. My steps toward the office were hesitant, each one a battle against the fear that clawed at my resolve. The door, imposing and unyielding, stood between me and the secrets it guarded. With a deep breath, I reached for the handle, the metal cold and foreboding beneath my fingers. The door creaked open, revealing a room bathed in moonlight, its contents shadowed and indistinct. The air inside was heavy, laden with the scent of old paper and something else, something darker. The office was a shrine to knowledge and forbidden lore. Bookshelves lined the walls, their volumes ancient and bound in leather that whispered of centuries past. But it was the symbols that drew my gaze, etched into the furniture, their designs complex and unsettling. Amidst the tomes of history and philosophy lay books that spoke of demonic entities and rituals, their pages filled with illustrations that chilled the blood. One book lay open, its pages illuminated by the moon's pale light. The illustration on the spread depicted an ancient demon, its power growing with each turn of the page. But then, in an illustration that seemed out of place yet eerily fitting, a little girl stood holding a bloodied silver fork against the devil, causing him to recoil in fear. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. The twins, their behavior, the unexplained phenomena, they were all connected to something deeply malevolent, something that had roots in the very foundation of the mansion and its owner's past. As I stood there, absorbing the horror of my discovery, the mansion seemed to awaken fully. Mirrors reflected twisted landscapes, grotesque apparitions emerged from the walls, and disembodied voices filled the air, a symphony of the damned that echoed through the opulent halls. The night had only just begun, and the true horror of what lay within the mansion's walls was slowly revealing itself piece by terrifying piece. The air in the office grew colder, a palpable presence of something ancient and malevolent surrounding me. The books on the shelf seemed to stare back, each spine a silent testament to knowledge best left undiscovered. The symbols etched into the furniture now felt like a warning, a grim invitation to a world beyond my understanding. As I stood in the heart of the mansion's hidden darkness, the twins' laughs echoed up the stairwell, their tone chillingly monotone. It sent a shiver down my spine. The realization that the twins were not just possessed, but overtly malevolent sent waves of panic through me. And then they started speaking of a master. The mansion itself seemed to respond to the twins' declaration, the atmosphere thickening, shadows stretching and contorting into grotesque shapes. Mirrors, once reflective of the mansion's opulent interiors, now showcased twisted, nightmarish figures of young women covered in blood, in the realms of despair and desolation that defied the laws of nature. Apparitions, their forms grotesque and twisted, began to emerge from the walls, their presence a blight upon the physical world. The air was filled with disembodied voices, a cacophony of whispers, cries, and laughter that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. In a desperate attempt to protect the twins and myself, I ventured deeper into the office, drawn to the open book with its illustrations of demonic entities. The image of the little girl holding a bloodied silver fork against the devil resonated with me. It was a symbol of resistance, of power and innocence and purity that could repel even the most malevolent forces. The twins' behavior became increasingly erratic as well, their movements jerky and unnatural, as if puppeteered by unseen hands. They spoke of the sacred lady watching over them, a guardian of their twisted reality, hinting at a connection between the mansion's current horrors and rituals long forgotten. Amidst the chaos, a plan began to form in my head. The illustration in the book, the children's unnatural connection to the entity they called their master, and the ancient symbols all pointed to a ritualistic foundation for the horrors unfolding. And this was when I was truly convinced that both James and Antonia were somehow involved. If I could understand the ritual, perhaps I could find a way to break the connection, to banish the entity back to the darkness from which it came. The mansion, with its shifting shadows and endless rooms, now felt like a living entity, a maze designed to disorient and trap. And then I found the ritual chamber, hidden behind the office's bookshelf, which revealed the true depth of the darkness. The chamber was a grotesque cathedral of horror, its walls adorned with more symbols, candles arranged in sinister patterns, and a small blood-stained altar at its center. And then I heard a soft voice which shook me in my stride. It said that it was a babysitter once, just like me, but was sacrificed to a satanic demoness who was worshipped there. It added that my sacrifice will keep James and Antonia young and powerful. As the night pressed on, the connection between the twins' affliction and the couple's secret rituals became undeniable. The mansion was not just a home, it was a stronghold of ancient dark magic, a focal point for a power that thrived on pain and suffering. The realization that James and Antonia had orchestrated this nightmare, that they had sacrificed innocence for their own gain, was a betrayal of every sense of humanity I held dear. The previous babysitter's fate, now chillingly clear, was a grim foreshadowing of my own planned end. But as dawn approached, bringing with it a sliver of light to the darkness, I knew I had to act. The ritual that had bound the twins to their master could be broken, but it would require every ounce of courage and wit I possessed. The mansion's once grandeur now felt like a prison, each room a potential trap set by the very forces James and Antonia had summoned. The hidden passageway in the office led me to the heart of their dark practices, the ritual chamber, a room that reeked of malevolence and whispered of unspeakable acts. Standing at the threshold, I felt a surge of determination. I couldn't let fear dictate my actions, not when the twins, innocent pawns in this twisted game, needed me. The chamber was more than I had anticipated. Walls lined with ancient texts, the air thick with the residue of rituals past, and at its center, the altar, stained with the evidence of sacrifices made in the name of power and greed. This ends tonight. No more innocence will suffer. I spoke to the empty room, my voice steady despite the pounding of my heart. The mansion seemed to listen, the air growing still, as if in anticipation. It wasn't long before the sound of the front door heralded James and Antonia's return. They found me in their sanctum, the place where they believed their power was absolute. The look of surprise on their faces quickly turned to one of rage. You were part of the plan, a necessary sacrifice, but it seems we overestimated your compliance. Their words, dripping with malice, confirmed my worst fears. They had never intended for me to leave the mansion alive. I was to be part of their ritual, a continuation of their pact with a demonic entity for wealth and power. The previous babysitter's fate, a mystery that hung over the town, was now chillingly clear. She had been a sacrifice, just as they intended me to be. But understanding their plan gave me an edge. I knew what they were capable of, and I knew how to disrupt the ritual to save myself and the twins. In a moment of inspiration, I remembered the illustration from the book, the little girl wielding a silver fork against the darkness. It was a symbol of defiance, of purity combating the vilest evil. Scanning the room, my gaze landed on a silver fork, part of the ceremonial items laid out for the ritual. As James and Antonia began to chant, their voices merging in a cacophony of ancient words, I seized the fork. The ritual had started, the air vibrating with the power they summoned. The twins, caught in the grip of the possession, began to chant alongside their parents, their voices unnaturally deep. In a desperate gamble, I stabbed my own hand with the fork, the pain sharp and immediate. Holding it aloft, blood dripping from the wound, I interrupted the flow of the ritual. The reaction was instantaneous. Shadows recoiled as if burned. The chanting ceased, and the room fell into chaos. My actions were sudden, fueled by instinct rather than knowledge. The entity, a shadow within shadows, recoiled from the silver, its form wavering. James and Antonia, their concentration broken, stared in horror as the ritual backfired. The power they sought to control turned on them, their screams filling the room as the darkness they summoned enveloped them. In the aftermath, the mansion seemed to sigh, the oppressive atmosphere lifting as dawn's first light crept through the windows. The twins, released from their possession, collapsed, their small forms shaking with sobs. Gathering them in my arms, I fled the ritual chamber, the mansion's corridors no longer a labyrinth designed to trap, but a path to freedom. As we escaped into the morning light, the mansion behind us felt like a tomb, a monument to the consequences of unchecked ambition and the darkest desires of the human heart. As the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of gold and pink, I stood outside the mansion, the twins huddled against me. Despite the warmth of the morning sun, a chill lingered in my bones, a reminder of the horrors we had escaped. The mansion, once a symbol of affluence and power, now stood silent, a witness to the night's terrifying events. The police and emergency services swarmed the property, their lights piercing the remaining shadows. I watched, a bystander to the aftermath, as they ventured inside, only to emerge later, their faces etched with confusion and disbelief. James and Antonia were gone, vanished as if swallowed by the mansion itself. The only evidence of the night's ordeal was the ritual chamber, untouched by human hands, yet stripped of its power, the darkness that had once thrived there, now a mere echo. They were here. They were part of something evil. My words felt inadequate, a futile attempt to explain the unexplainable. The officers listened, their skepticism palpable, yet unable to dismiss the tangible fear in my voice or the innocence in the twins' tear-stained faces. As the day wore on, the mansion was declared a crime scene, though no bodies were found, no sign of James and Antonia, nor any trace of the demonic presence that had orchestrated the night's terror. It was as if the mansion itself had purged the evidence of its dark past, leaving more questions than answers. The twins, now free from the possession, clung to me, their eyes wide with the memory of their ordeal. They were too young to fully understand what had transpired, yet the experience had left its mark, a shadow that might never fully recede. In their silence, there was a bond, an unspoken understanding that we had faced the darkness together and emerged, if not unscathed, then at least alive. As the authorities began their investigation, piecing together the fragments of the story, I sat with the twins, watching the mansion from a distance. The horrors of the night still echoed in my mind, a reminder of the thin veil that separates our world from the darkness that lurks just beyond our sight. The sun climbed higher, its light a balm to the night's wounds. The twins, exhausted from the ordeal, fell asleep in my arms, their breathing steady and calm. In their innocence, there was hope, a promise that the darkness had not claimed everything. I knew the road to recovery would be long, both for the twins and myself. The trauma of the night's events had changed us, binding us together in a shared experience that few could understand. Yet, in the light of day, the shadows that had seemed so menacing now appeared less formidable, a reminder that even the darkest night must give way to the dawn. As the emergency services packed up, leaving the mansion to its silence, I made a silent vow. I would never forget the horrors we had faced, but I would not let them define us. The twins deserved a future unmarred by the darkness of the past, and I was determined to help them find it. With one last look at the mansion, a symbol of our ordeal, I turned away, the twins safe beside me. The horrors of the night might echo in our memories, but they would not hold sway over our lives. We had survived, and in that survival, there was a strength that no darkness could diminish.
My name's Brad, and I'm an accountant. The most boring job in the world? Sure, on most days I would have agreed with you, but then I experienced things that I wouldn't wish on my worst of enemies, and it made me realize how happy I actually was by being a normal, boring accountant. I work for AuraGuard, a company specializing in something you wouldn't typically associate with debits and credits, feel-good stones. They claim these stones harness mystical energies, offering protection against evil eyes and bad vibes. As for me, well, let's just say I'm more of a numbers guy than a believer in mystical mumbo-jumbo. AuraGuard is a global enterprise, marketing these stones with all the flair and persuasion of a top-notch sales team. You gotta give it to them. They know how to sell a dream. But deep down, I can't help but view it all as a cleverly disguised multi-level marketing scheme. The thing is, skepticism doesn't pay the bills, and in this economy, a job's a job. But then there was my colleague, Rose. She was a firm believer in what we sold. Rose would often talk about the positive energy she felt from the stones, how they changed her life. I admired her conviction, even if I didn't share it, but something changed in her over the past few weeks. She became distant, her usual vibrant self replaced by a somber shadow. I would catch her staring blankly at her computer screen, lost in thought, the spark in her eyes dimmed. Then, last week, tragedy struck. Rose, the same Rose who was always the first to arrive and the last to leave, who could brighten up the room with her smile, took her own life. She jumped off our office building, a fall that silenced her forever. The news was like a punch to the gut. Disbelief, grief, confusion. I felt it all. The office wasn't the same without her. Her empty chair was a constant reminder of the life we'd lost. I never thought I'd miss her this much. In the wake of her passing, her workload was unceremoniously dumped onto my desk. Long hours became my new norm, staying back at the empty office, trying to make sense of her unfinished business. It was during one of these late nights, the clock ticking past midnight, that I stumbled upon something unexpected: Rose's journal. Hidden in a secret compartment of her desk, it was an ordinary-looking leather-bound book. But as I flipped through its pages, what I found was anything but ordinary. The initial entries were mundane, filled with everyday office activities, meetings, and deadlines. But then, something caught my eye. Entries that continued well after her death. Dates that shouldn't have been there, written in Rose's unmistakable handwriting. My mind raced with questions. How was this possible? Was someone playing a cruel joke? Or was there something more sinister at play? Each new entry was a window into Rose's thoughts, but these thoughts were supposedly penned when she was no longer with us. It sent a shiver down my spine. Sitting there, alone in the dimly lit office, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. I felt a chill run down my spine, an eerie sensation that I wasn't alone. The shadows in the corner seemed to dance and flicker in the faint light. I told myself it was just the fatigue, the stress of the situation playing tricks on my mind. With a deep breath, I closed the journal, deciding it was time for a coffee break. But as I locked up and stepped into the deserted hallway, a feeling of unease washed over me. The quiet was oppressive, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was watching me from the shadows. I quickened my pace to the coffee machine, and just for a second, I could see a shadow standing before it. It was impossible. There was no one, yet the shadow on the wall was clear. Something invisible was obstructing the light. I changed my mind and rushed out to grab a quick smoke. But even as I stepped out into the cool night air, I couldn't help but glance back over my shoulder, half expecting to see a figure standing in the darkened windows of the office. The night was still, only the sounds of my footsteps echoing, and yet the feeling of being watched lingered. I called my boss, hoping he'd let me continue the work tomorrow, but he just woke up from his sleep, mumbled something grumpily, and cut the call. If my bonus didn't depend on impressing him, I would have rushed back home without care. The smoke calmed me down, and I thought I must have been hallucinating, but the journal, with its posthumous entries, lay heavy on my mind. So, I picked it up again as soon as I ventured inside. Each entry was like a puzzle, a piece of a larger, more ominous picture that I was yet to fully comprehend. Initially, the journal entries seemed mundane, detailing Rose's daily routines and interactions at Beauregard, but as I delved deeper, the tone shifted. There were cryptic references, subtle at first, then increasingly alarming. Rose wrote about the stones with a tone that oscillated between awe and fear, hinting at a truth far removed from the simple energy-boosting properties we marketed. As I was poring over these puzzling entries, that I noticed more shadows. This time, at least 3. They seemed to flicker and move in the corner of my eye. Each time I looked directly at them, they were still, innocuous. But the moment my attention returned to the journal, they danced again. Then, the phone calls began. The first few were just anonymous callers hanging up as soon as I answered. I wrote them off, but then multiple phones started ringing. The silence of the phone breaking was jarring, and each time I answered, there was nothing but an eerie static, as if someone was there, listening, but not speaking. I tried to rationalize these occurrences. Stress, lack of sleep, the emotional toll of Rose's death. They were all plausible explanations for what I was experiencing. Yet, a part of me couldn't shake off the feeling that something truly unexplainable was happening. I took another coffee break, and this time I took Rose's journal with me. I flipped to the last entry she had written before her death. It was frantic, almost illegible, a stark contrast to her usually neat handwriting.
I know too much. The stones, they're not what they seem. There's a darkness to them, an ancient energy that's not meant to be tampered with. I fear I've stirred something that should have remained hidden.
Chills ran down my spine as I read her words. What had Rose discovered? What was this darkness she spoke of? As I contemplated her warning, the office lights flickered, casting an eerie glow. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. I looked around the corridor, half expecting to see something emerge from the shadows. Just then, a phone rang, slicing through the silence.
I hesitated, then picked it up. Static filled my ear, but this time, amidst the crackling, I thought I heard a faint whisper, a voice so soft it was almost inaudible. I strained to listen, but for a moment, I felt that it was Rose. And then I heard,
"Chocolates and turnips."
I hung up instantly and ran for my desk, my heart racing. The room felt colder, the shadows deeper. This time I was assured that the shadows were watching me, probably playing with me. But chocolates and turnips? I knew exactly what it was. Rose, when alive, had an inside joke with the rest of the accounting staff, and this was her password. I knew then that I couldn't ignore what was happening. There was a mystery here, something dark and dangerous, and it was beckoning me. I had to know more. I had to understand what Rose had discovered, what had driven her to such despair that she jumped off the building. And so, I made a decision. I would delve deeper into the secrets of Beauregard, into the true nature of the stones we sold. Little did I know this decision would lead me down a path from which there was no turning back. The more I dug, the more I realized that the stones we were selling were not mere trinkets of a multi-level marketing scheme, but something far more sinister. I put the password and logged into Rose's computer. There was a file named X, and I opened it to my shock. The accounts in Rose's folder grew darker and more desperate as they progressed. She had recorded videos of her having nightmares, shadowy figures moving in her apartment, and an overwhelming sense of dread that they followed her both in and out of sleep. Her words painted a picture of someone on the brink of a terrifying revelation. One particularly chilling entry caught my attention. Rose recorded a way to a hidden room within our office building, a place she believed held the key to understanding the true nature of the stones. The thought of such a place within the confines of our mundane office building seemed ludicrous, yet something in her words rang true. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I decided to search for this hidden room. It was a fool's errand, wandering the corridors of the office after hours, tapping on walls and looking for secret panels like a protagonist in a cliché mystery novel. But to my utter disbelief, I found it. Tucked away behind a seemingly innocuous bookshelf in the founder's old office was a small, dimly lit room. The air inside was stale, thick with the dust of decades. The walls were lined with shelves holding various artifacts, ancient-looking stones, old books with indecipherable scripts, and disturbingly, photographs. The photographs were old, sepia-toned. They showed our company's founder, a man I had only seen in corporate portraits, in a very different light. He was pictured with a Native American tribe, his hands clasped around the stones that seemed eerily similar to the ones Beauregard sold. The expression on the faces of the tribal members were not of friendship or partnership, but of fear and mistrust. I felt a deep unease settle in my stomach as I looked around the room. It was as if the very walls were imbued with a dark energy. I realized that Rose's fears were not unfounded. The stones were not just a part of a scam. They were something ancient, something that held a power we were not meant to meddle with. As I stood there absorbing the gravity of my discovery, a sudden wave of dizziness overcame me. The room seemed to spin, and for a moment I thought I was going to faint. But it wasn't just a loss of balance. It was as if I was being pulled into a different time, a different realm. Suddenly, visions flashed before my eyes, disjointed and terrifying. I saw rituals, dark and ancient, the stones at their center. There were chants, sacrifices, and a sense of an overwhelming, malevolent presence being invoked. Amidst it all stood a figure, a dark, monstrous entity, its form barely discernible, yet its essence terrifyingly clear. I stumbled out of the room, gasping for air. The visions faded, but their imprint lingered in my mind. What I had seen was not of this world, not of this time. It was a glimpse into a past that we steeped in darkness and danger, a past that Beauregard was directly tied to. Shaken, I realized the true depth of the abyss I was peering into. Rose had uncovered a secret so dark, so dangerous that it had cost her her life.
and now I too was entangled in its web. The encounter in the hidden room left me reeling. The visions I had experienced were not just mere hallucinations. They felt too real, too vivid to be products of my imagination. The more I thought about them, the more I realized that I had witnessed something ancient and malevolent, a dark secret that Beauregard had buried deep within its foundations. I couldn't shake the images from my mind, the sinister rituals, the chanting, the sacrifices. They were scenes from a forgotten past, yet they felt ominously relevant. The dark entity that appeared in my visions was particularly haunting. It was a formless shadow, yet its presence was overwhelmingly oppressive, exuding a sense of ancient evil and an unbridled malice. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that dark, monstrous figure. It was as if the entity from my visions had escaped the confines of my mind and was now lurking in the corners of my reality. Shadows seemed to move with a life of their own, and the night got filled with strange, unsettling noises. But the burning need kept me from running away. To understand, to uncover the truth behind Beauregard and the stones it sold, Rose's journal, the hidden room, the photographs, and the visions. They were pieces of a puzzle that I was determined to solve. I went back to Rose's research, delving into the history of Beauregard and its founder. The more I read, the more the pieces began to fit together. The founder, Nicholas, had been a man of ambition and ruthlessness, obsessed with ancient rituals and the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. He had sought out the Native American tribe in the photographs, not as a friend, but as a conqueror, seeking to harness the power of the stones for his own purposes. The tribe had warned him of the dangers, of the dark energy that the stones contained, but he had not heeded their warnings. Instead, he had taken the stones, using them in unspeakable rituals that he had unleashed something terrible, something that should have remained hidden. As I pieced together the history, I began to understand the nature of the entity from my visions. It was a guardian of sorts, a dark protector of the stones' secrets. Its awakening was tied to the stones, to the rituals that the founder had performed. But why has it appeared to me now? Was it because of my probing into the company's dark past? Or was there something more, something that tied me to this ancient evil? The answer came unexpectedly. As I was going through more of Rose's journal entries, I stumbled upon a passage that sent chills down my spine. Rose had written about a prophecy, an ancient prediction that spoke of a reckoning, a time when the truth of the stones would be revealed and the entity would be unleashed. And then I found a new entry, which I was sure wasn't there half an hour ago, as if Rose wrote it when I was gone.
You are the key. The key will save the world.
I realized then that I was not just an accidental witness to these events. I was a part of them, a key player in a drama that had been unfolding for centuries. I was the one who was meant to uncover the truth, to face the darkness that Beauregard had unleashed. And beside me, on Rose's desk, was placed her key, the one she believed warded off evil eye. My disbelief went for a toss long ago, so I grabbed it. Armed with this knowledge, I knew what I had to do. I had to face the entity, to confront the darkness that lurked in the shadows of Beauregard. It was a terrifying prospect, but it was the only way to end this nightmare. As I steeled myself for the confrontation, I couldn't help but wonder if I was ready, if I had the strength to face the ancient evil that awaited me. This night was the longest of my life. The office was eerily quiet, the only sound my own ragged breathing and the occasional creak of the building settling. I could feel the presence of the entity, a larger shadow than the others, lurking and watching from the corners, a suffocating darkness that seemed to press in on me from all sides. As I made my way to the hidden room again, the air grew colder, the shadows deeper. I could sense the entity's malevolence, its anger at my intrusion. It was as if the very building was alive, aware of my intentions and determined to stop me. I opened the door to the hidden room, and there it was, the entity, a swirling mass of shadows, its form constantly shifting and changing. It was like nothing I had ever seen, a nightmare made real. Its presence was overwhelming, a tidal wave of darkness that threatened to engulf me.
I stood there, frozen in fear, as the entity moved towards me. Its whispers filled the room, a cacophony of voices that were both terrifying and seductive. It spoke of power, of secrets, of the darkness that lay within all of us. But then, something unexpected happened. A new entry appeared in Rose's journal, the pages flipping open as if guided by an unseen hand. The entry was written in Rose's handwriting, but the words were meant for me.
Use the key.
It read,
Say, Koala Ixapa.
I didn't understand how or why, but I knew I had to trust Rose's words. I grabbed the key, feeling its energy pulsing in my hands. As the entity advanced, I held the key out in front of me, focusing all my will on it, and said Kihola Ixapa. The effect was immediate. The key glowed with a bright light, illuminating the room and pushing back the darkness. The entity howled in rage, its form flickering and wavering under the light. I could feel its power waning, its hold on the world weakening. With one final effort, I directed the energy of the key towards the entity, focusing on a shard of emerald that lay amongst them. The emerald glowed brightly, and then with a sound like a thunderclap, the entity was sucked into it, trapped within its crystalline depths. The room was suddenly quiet, the oppressive darkness gone. I was left standing there, shaking and exhausted, but alive. I had done it. I had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. But there was one last surprise waiting for me. As I turned to leave the room, I saw her, Rose's apparition, standing there smiling at me. She nodded, a gesture of gratitude and farewell, and then faded away. Her spirit was at peace, her mission complete. I knew then what I had to do. I had to finish what Rose had started. I had to expose Beauregard's dark secrets, to bring the truth to light. It wouldn't be easy, but I owed it to Rose, to the victims of the entity, to myself. I left the office that night, the shard of emerald safely tucked away in my pocket. The night was still, the stars bright above. I felt a sense of purpose, a determination to see this through to the end. Beauregard's days of exploiting the dark energies of the stones were over. I would make sure of it. As I stepped into the dimly lit cavernous space of the Walmart in Austin, the air was thick with tension, a stark contrast to the usual hum of daily commerce. The call had come in as a typical hostage situation, surprisingly just when I was driving to work to quit my job. But I changed my mind because the brief on the suspect was anything but typical. A woman, claiming invisible forces controlled the fate of all within, had shot dead 3 people and taken several hostages. She came armed with makeshift weapons and DIY bombs. Her demand? She just wanted the president to acknowledge that there was no free will and invisible threads were manipulating their lives. I approached cautiously. The store looked like the aftermath of a storm, chaos everywhere. I had to walk for a good 10 minutes to reach the counter where she had barricaded herself and the hostages. The woman was Dr. Cassandra Lyle, a name that had once been associated with groundbreaking theoretical physics, but now was synonymous with chaos. She was wheezing like a rabid dog, crying, then laughing, then talking to herself, then suddenly shooting a bullet in the air.
Welcome, negotiator.
She called out, as if she had been expecting me, her figure emerging from the shadows. She was smaller than I'd imagined, but the guns in her hands were unmistakably real and deadly. I introduced myself, keeping my voice steady. Dr. Lyle, let's talk about how we can resolve this peacefully. A laugh escaped her.
Peace? There's no peace in being controlled. It's just a state of mind, and the world will know it soon.
She had a lot to say, so I had to patiently listen, make her believe that I could be on her side. She lectured on the nature of reality, control, and the experiments that had shattered her mind. It was evident that Cassandra was not just smart, she was a genius, pushed to the brink.
Her theories, once celebrated in the academic world, now served as the foundation of her delusion that she could untangle her fate by exposing others to the truth of their manipulation. The chaos she orchestrated around us was a demonstration of her theory. Shelves toppled over, messages written with bullets, hostages positioned in calculated spots, along with motion sensors throughout the store. If one tried to run, 2 others would be shot by homemade sensor-triggered guns. They were all lab rats to her.
Look around you,
She urged, gesturing to the chaos.
This is no random act. It's a carefully constructed experiment.
And that's when it hit me. I was a part of it too. The negotiation, my presence was her plan. For someone who believed the world is controlled by invisible threads, she wanted to prove that she's controlling this. The stakes have never been higher. I wasn't just negotiating for the hostages' lives. I was fighting to prove we weren't just pawns in her deranged game. Her movements were unpredictable, yet patterned. It was clear she was steps ahead, anticipating moves in a game only she fully understood. As we spoke, her monologues veered between lucidity and madness. She spoke of her research, detailing experiments that blurred the lines between physics and philosophy, reality and perception. The hostages were chess pieces in her grand design. She wanted the world to see, to understand the invisible threads she believed controlled them. But in her eyes, I saw more than just a desire to enlighten. There was a plea for validation, for someone to acknowledge her genius. Realizing this, I shifted tactics, engaging her not as a negotiator to a hostage taker, but as a peer to a scientist. I questioned her theories, challenged her conclusions, and in doing so, saw the first flicker of doubt cross her face. It was a small victory, but a crack in the armor she had built around her psyche. "I'm not your enemy, Cassandra," I found myself saying, using her first name in an attempt to reach the person behind the psychosis. "But this isn't the way to prove your theories." Her laughter, sharp and sudden, cut through the tension.
You think this is about proving something to the world? No. This is about proving something to myself.
The game changed in that moment. It was no longer about the invisible threads of control, but about a woman trying to reclaim her authority. The realization was my opening, the weakness in her strategy I had been searching for. With careful words, I began to dismantle the world she had built in the store, pointing out the inconsistencies in her actions and the reality she perceived. Slowly, the fervor in her eyes dimmed, replaced by confusion, then realization. The guns lowered, her posture slumped, and for the first time since the standoff began, Cassandra Lyle looked defeated. It was then, in her moment of vulnerability, that the real battle was won. The SWAT team, having waited for my signal, moved in, securing the store and ensuring the safety of all inside. Dr. Lyle was taken into custody. In the aftermath, as the hostages were led out to the embrace of waiting loved ones, Cassandra was pulled away by 4 men as she yelled at the top of her voice and threw her hands around. The store lights flickered back to normalcy, and just as the mad woman was being taken out past me, she stopped, looked into my eyes for a few seconds, and smiled before saying,
I broke the threads so I will be put down, but they don't know that you broke them too.
This left me puzzled. What did she mean by that? And that is when it hit me. If she had not orchestrated all of this, I would have quit my job right now. The invisible threads wanted that of me, but because of her deadly game, I changed my fate and learned her theory. I broke the invisible threads too because of her. The truth, like the invisible thread she spoke of, remained elusive, tangled in the intersection of science, belief, and the human mind's unfathomable depths. But I had a feeling that I had a lot more work to do.
I've always been an avid hiker and have gone on literally hundreds of different hiking trails over the last several years. I've explored just about every trail and good place to hike near where I live, and whenever I travel, the first thing I do is look for good trails as well. I really enjoy being out in nature whenever I can, and it makes me feel really good and relaxes me. Anyways, the story I'm telling you occurred about 2 years ago now. I went to a trail near a wooded area which was about 15 minutes away from where I live, really out in the wilderness. There was a hiking path in the area, but I wanted to go off the path a little bit because I had been on the hiking path before. There was some great land in the area, and even though there wasn't an official path in this one spot, there was plenty of space to walk around, and it was kind of an unofficial path. I walked down that ways for a good 30 minutes or so, but then the terrain started to get really rough, and after a while, I wasn't really equipped for it with the shoes that I had on, so I turned back to return to my car. I got back and drove all the way home before realizing that I didn't have my phone on me. I got that terrible feeling you get when you lose your phone, and after looking around in my car, I realized I hadn't remembered using my phone since I had been way out in the woods. I realized that I knew exactly where it probably was. Well, not the exact location, but an estimated area of where it would be. I realized it likely fell out of my pocket as I walked over the rough terrain in the woods. By now it had gotten dark out, and I was a little bit hesitant to go back out there, but I had been out in the woods at night before, and I wasn't scared at all. I hadn't seen anyone else in the park that day either, so I wasn't too concerned anyone would take my phone or anything like that. Like most people, I used my phone for everything, so even though it was nighttime, I decided to drive back and quickly go out to get my phone. I was very confident I would find it, and as I got there and set out to the path again, I couldn't help but feel slightly creeped out entering the woods at night all by myself. I walked on the path to the point that I had gone off of it earlier. I have always been really good with directions and landmarks, so I knew it was the same spot. Then I followed the little unofficial trail until the part with the bumpy terrain to where I expected my phone to be. And as I entered the area, I thought I heard a noise of a tree branch cracking in the distance, maybe 50 feet away. It caused me to pause in my tracks and go silent, but I heard nothing else. As I started to walk again, I heard more noises though. I thought it was some type of animal and looked in the direction. I didn't see anything, and then heard the noise of walking in the distance again, but it sounded distinctly like a human the way the footsteps were. Still, I knew it was unlikely that anyone would be out here now. I nervously decided to call out hello on the slim chance there was another person out there, but I got no response. I wasn't sure what kind of animal it would be though, and as I slowly walked closer, suddenly I finally saw my phone on the ground. It was such a relief to finally see what I had been looking for. Now I could get out of the woods. I picked it up, and as I did, I started to hear the noises again coming towards me. I just couldn't tell what was making the noises. I looked all around, and finally off in the distance, I thought I saw what appeared to be a person ducked behind a tree. All I really saw was a leg for a second, and that was it, but I decided to get out of there as quickly as I could. I didn't want to run, so I started slowly walking, but it quickly turned into a fast walk, and as I heard noises behind me, I couldn't take it anymore and I turned it into a full sprint. I ran as fast as I could through the woods, hearing some noises behind me as I did. The noises weren't really that close, and I couldn't tell for sure if I was being followed or not, but I was not wasting a second in there longer than I had to. I had my phone, and I was just happy to get out of there. When I finally made it back to my car, I immediately started it up and left. I drove home, and once I got back, I finally was able to respond to some texts that I had gotten and things like that. As I was on my phone, I noticed that the camera app had been opened. I went on it and noticed some photos on my phone that I didn't recognize. There were several pictures taken on my phone during the time that it had been lost in the woods. One appeared to be of the sky, and another couple were of the ground that were blurry. Then I saw one that appeared to be a man, but it was really blurry. I couldn't make out any details of his face with how blurry it was or anything like that, but seeing those photos really gave me the creeps. That woods was really out there in kind of the middle of nowhere, and I can't believe anyone else was out there, much less who would have been on my phone. I'm quite certain whoever took those photos was the person out there in the woods with me. This happened 2 years ago now. I'm a female and live alone in an apartment building. Like many people, I have an Instagram page that I post on pretty regularly. I would say I post on average at least once a month. I enjoy posting pictures on Instagram, but I know that occasionally you have to deal with a bot or a creepy person. For the most part, I hadn't had any bad experiences until this happened. One day I opened the Instagram app and saw that I had a direct message. It was from one of my followers, a guy named Tim. I didn't know him and I didn't follow him either. I'm not sure how long he had been following me for, but he sent me a message asking if I could come and hang out with him. I found this to be kind of weird and did not respond. I mean, he didn't even have a conversation with me and I didn't know him. He couldn't possibly expect me to just say yes. And based on his profile picture, I wasn't interested in him. I figured that he wouldn't message me again after that. But the next day, he sent me another message. He once more asked me to hang out with him and said that he could pick me up. This time, I responded and said, "No thanks, I appreciate the offer though." Now he had to understand that I wasn't interested. Tim then tried to convince me, but I ignored him. I didn't really know why he was sending me these messages seemingly out of nowhere. The next day, I didn't get any more messages from him. I figured that he would stop communicating with me at that point. The following night, I went grocery shopping after work. I would go shopping occasionally here and there whenever I needed to. I didn't have a particular routine or anything. I was inside of the store shopping for about 20 minutes. The time was probably about 8 p.m. or so. After I was done shopping, I headed out to my car in the parking lot. By now, it was mostly quiet, but there were a few people here and there. I got all the way to my vehicle, only to see that there was a car parked next to me. I started to take my groceries out of the cart and put them in my car. That's when the door opened to the car next to me and a guy got out. I did not recognize him. He just seemed like another guy going shopping, but he didn't walk to the store and instead headed straight for me. At first, I was confused, but he then said my name and asked me why I thought I could ignore him. I realized that it was Tim from Instagram, and I did recognize him from his picture at that point. I was too confused to say anything though. He said that he was here now, and we were together, so we may as well hang out. I finally spoke and asked him what he was doing and how he knew I would be here. He claimed that it was a coincidence. I finished putting my groceries in my car and said that I had to get home. I closed my trunk and then tried to walk around him to my driver's door, but he stopped me by grabbing my arm. He told me to come on and go with him. I asked him to let me go and said that he was hurting my arm, but he started to pull me away towards his car. He was a lot stronger than I was, and we started moving towards his vehicle. Then I started yelling as loud as I could. I was yelling help and telling him to let me go. There were luckily a few people that were walking to their cars in the parking lot a ways away. They took notice of what was going on though, and when Tim saw this, he let me go and told me to shut up. I instantly ran around my car for the driver's door and got inside. Tim followed me, but I locked the door before he could get in. I didn't waste any time and I drove out of there. Tim had to run back to his car, and I left the parking lot extremely fast. By the time he started his car, I had already left. I went around another nearby store that was out of his sight. Then I took some random residential roads until I was sure he wasn't following me. After that, I drove home. I was so focused on not letting him follow me that I forgot to call the police for a while, but eventually I did. I told them everything that happened, but when I got to my Instagram page, his account was gone. I think he deleted it. Still, after that night, I never saw Tim or heard from him again.
I used to live in Southern California, in the Los Angeles area. I moved about a year ago, but still live in the general area. Over here, there's a popular grocery store chain called Ralph's. The stores aren't that big, but are pretty nice and generally clean and organized. That was always my main place to go shopping and get groceries, and I went there more times than I can count. I'm a female, and during my time in LA, I lived in a house that I rented with my roommate Jenna. I met her shortly after moving to LA, and we became good friends. We decided to rent a house together, and it was a 2-bedroom place where obviously I had one bedroom and she had the other. I had been out one day and stopped at Ralph's on the way home to get groceries. It had been a while since I had gotten them, and I was running low on many things. It was probably about 7 p.m. or so, maybe 8, I really don't remember. So when I got inside the store, it was kind of busy, like this particular location always seemed to be. I got a shopping cart and began getting everything on my list I had made on my phone. When I shop, I'm usually really focused and I don't really look around at the other people. So I had shopped through the store for maybe 20 or 30 minutes and was sort of near the end of it when a woman approached me. She said, "Excuse me," and I looked up at her. I had no clue what she could possibly want. She focused her eyes a ways away and asked me if I knew that man over there. I had no clue what she was talking about. I looked over at the man in question. There was this guy standing a pretty far ways away, kind of looking at items at the end of an aisle. He was wearing a black t-shirt and a black hat. I had never seen the man before that I was aware of. "No," I told the woman. "I don't know who he is." The woman's response sent a chill down my spine. "Well, I could be wrong, but he seems to be following you all around the store," she continued. "I don't know if you noticed or not, but I thought I would let you know." She went on to say that she saw him follow me from one aisle to another, and it just seemed weird. She later saw him trailing me again in another section of the store. I told the woman thanks for letting me know, and I would watch out for him. I was almost done shopping anyways. The woman was really nice, and even asked if I wanted her to go talk to the man and ask him what he was doing. I told her that wouldn't be necessary, and I was confident that it wouldn't be a problem. I decided to get the last few items and then leave. The store was still pretty busy, so overall I didn't feel like I was in any danger. I went over to the final aisle that I needed to go in to complete my shopping list. When I was in that aisle, only one other person was at the other end. I spent about a minute there, and just as I put an item in my cart, I saw somebody enter the aisle from the other side. It was the guy in the black hat. He very briefly looked at me, and then started examining something on the shelves facing away from me. He carried a shopping basket with a few random items in it. I felt like maybe he actually was following me all around, and I possibly should have took the woman up on her offer to question him. I quickly pushed my cart to the end of the aisle and towards the check lanes. When I got out of the aisle, I looked behind me, but didn't immediately see the man. I got in line to check out and waited for a few minutes. I kept looking around the whole time, now really aware of my surroundings. When I was putting my items on the conveyor belt, I noticed the guy again. There were a couple of people now behind me in line, and he got into the back of the line. I tried to keep an eye on him, making sure I knew where he was. My items were scanned by the employee and put into bags. As this was going on, I saw the man suddenly leave the line and walk away. I was happy to see this and didn't really pay attention to where exactly he was going to. I thought maybe he saw a line that was shorter or something. Either way, it made me feel better knowing he was moving away from me. Soon, I paid for my groceries and put the bags in my cart, then I left. I walked out of the store and into the parking lot. Now that I was outside of the store, I was extra careful. I was afraid the guy would be out in the parking lot waiting for me or something, but I didn't see him. I carefully made my way to my car and loaded up the groceries in the back. Then I got inside, started my engine, and drove off. I felt relieved to be out of there and that I hadn't seen the man. I wondered who he was and why he had been following me. I believed the woman that the guy had in fact been following me around the store. When he went down that last aisle and then got in line behind me, it confirmed it. Either way, everything was fine now. I drove home, getting there probably 20 minutes later. When I got home, my roommate Jenna was back as well for the day. I cooked some food for myself as Jenna had already made something and was eating. Then I went into my bedroom to eat, relax, and watch a show. My door was open, and probably 20 minutes later, Jenna was in my doorway. She said that there was a car parked out front that seemed weird. She asked me if I was expecting anyone. I got up and told her no. My heart then started racing, remembering the man who had seemingly followed me around Ralph's. I quickly told Jenna about it. She said that she noticed a car running and parked on the side of the road right in front of our house. We both went over to the window to check. The car was still there. The headlights were on, and we could sort of see somebody inside of it, but couldn't make out any details. For the next several minutes, we kept an eye on it. Nothing changed though. The person didn't get out or drive away. We decided to just forget about it. It had to be just a coincidence or something. I returned to my bedroom as Jenna was hanging out in the living room. I told her to let me know if the car left. Probably 10 minutes went by, and I heard Jenna running over to my room suddenly. When she arrived at my doorway, she told me that she heard somebody get out of the car. We both walked over to the window to look out. Before we got there, though, there was a knock on the front door. He was now right there on the step. We both very carefully went to the front window to look out. We were extremely careful not to be seen by him and barely lifted up parts of the blinds. I saw the same guy from Ralph's, and it was definitely him. He was wearing the same black shirt, but now he didn't have on his black hat and was wearing a different one. It was a Domino's pizza hat. The guy was also holding one of those pizza bags. We were not going to answer the door, and after a few moments, he knocked again. This time, he said something. Pizza delivery. We couldn't believe this guy was trying to pose as a pizza delivery driver. We looked out to his car. It was older looking and didn't have a Domino's thing on top of it or anything. The guy was definitely trying to trick us. He then spoke again. Someone ordered a pizza to this house. They paid for it. I'm just trying to deliver it. Is anybody home? He seemed desperate to try to get inside the house, but we weren't going to fall for it. We both kept silent and just hoped that the man wouldn't try to break his way in. He stood there, quiet, for about a minute. Then, to both of our surprise, he actually tried opening the front door. It was locked, obviously, and he couldn't get in. The man then began walking away, back towards his car. We both breathed a sigh of relief when we saw this. We watched him put the pizza bag in his front passenger seat, and we thought he would then get in and drive away. But he didn't. He started walking back up through the front yard towards the house. Both of our hearts sank. What was he doing now? The man did not walk to the front door this time, though, but to the side of the house. Jenna and I started to panic. We wondered what we should do, if we should call the police or something. About a minute went by, and we heard our back doorknob turning. The man was trying to get in through the back door. That was the only other entrance to the house. Thankfully, it was also locked. Then, about another minute later, we watched him return into view in the front yard. The guy then walked back to his car again. This time, he finally got in the driver's seat. We kept watching, and we didn't take our eyes off the car until it drove away. That was a huge relief to see. We just hoped that he wouldn't come back, and thankfully, he didn't. We both could not believe that he'd actually tried entering our house multiple times. Knocking on the door and posing as a pizza delivery driver was bad enough, but trying to open the door was insane. At least he hadn't tried breaking in. After that, I never saw the man again.
This happened just a couple of weeks ago when I went to Walmart one night. I think it was about 8 o'clock, and I went there to only get a few things. When I got inside the store, it seemed pretty normal to me. It wasn't too busy, and it wasn't completely dead either. I didn't waste any time and started walking to the right. The first thing on my list was to get some more soap. As I was walking down that way, I remember seeing a man walking in the opposite direction. He was wearing a shirt that said "Human Mammal" on it. I specifically remember seeing that. But afterwards, I passed him by and kept walking. After getting the soap, I then headed towards the back end of the store. I was over there getting the last several items, and it took me a little bit over 5 minutes. Then I headed back towards the front end of the store. When I made it a little more than halfway to the front, that particular area was very quiet. But there was one person there, and they caught my attention. It was the man that I had seen earlier, and he was standing in a random aisle, just pushing things off the shelf. It was like he was trying to make a mess. The man had slightly long dark hair, was somewhat big, and a little bit less than 6 feet tall. When I saw him doing this, I couldn't help but look. I was going to just keep walking past him, but when I got kind of close to him, I stopped. The man looked at me as he continued throwing things on the floor. I asked him what he was doing. I didn't say it in a way as if I worked at Walmart or as if I was mad at him. I was just genuinely curious. The man looked at me as I spoke, but did not stop his actions. After my question, he looked away and completely ignored me. I looked around and did not see any employees in the immediate area. When I looked back to the man, he was giving me the middle finger. I thought about saying something to the guy, but decided not to and just walked away. Somebody would see what he was doing soon enough, and he would probably get kicked out of the store or banned. I walked the rest of the way over to the self-checkouts. Then I checked out and started to leave. Well, I guess as I was checking out, the man in the human mammal shirt walked over to me without me knowing, because as soon as I was walking into the parking lot, I looked back and saw the guy walking behind me. He was like 50 feet back, and at first, I wasn't sure if he just happened to be leaving at the same time as me or not. I don't even know why I decided to look behind me, but I'm glad that I did. The guy appeared to be looking right at me, which was strange, but I ignored it. I continued as normal and got to my car, unlocked it, and went inside. I wasn't in a rush to leave or anything, but when I started the engine and was getting ready to back out, I saw him. The human mammal had followed me all the way to my car and was now standing right behind it. He was looking at me through the rear window of my vehicle.
I waited for about a minute, and he didn't move at all. Then I rolled down my window and yelled to the guy, asking him to move. He ignored me completely. He just stood there with barely any expression on his face. This guy was really confusing to me. I honked my horn, and he still didn't move. So then, I turned my engine off and got out of my car. At first, the man still didn't move. I asked him what his problem was, and he still ignored me. I wasn't really sure what to do. I didn't want to get in the guy's face or anything because he seemed sort of unpredictable. I decided to walk back inside Walmart. As I went through the parking lot, the man calmly walked behind me, following me yet again. By the time I made it to the doors, he was maybe 10 feet behind me. When I walked inside, I wasn't really sure where to go, so I just started walking. But when I made it sort of past the self-checkouts, I saw a few employees standing around. The man behind me was still about 10 feet back, and one of the employees approached him. He tried to walk past, but another employee walked in front of him. I heard that they were confronting him about throwing things off the shelves of the aisles. Somebody must have seen him, or possibly he was seen on security cameras. This allowed me to get away from the guy, and I turned around and left the store while he was still there. This time, he wasn't able to follow me. I left and haven't seen him since. Hopefully he was banned from the store or something. I'm really not sure why he did all of that. It was like he was just trying to cause problems. I had a terrifying experience last year. I live alone in a smaller house and have been living there for 3 years now. It has 2 bedrooms and just 1 bathroom, but it's enough space for me. I also have a somewhat small front yard and a fenced-in backyard as well. One Friday night, I got home from work a little early. I didn't have anything going on that night, but was going to hang out with some friends the following day. I decided to do all of my chores right then and there and get them out of the way. There are a lot of chores that I do throughout the week, but also some that I leave for the weekends, like doing laundry and vacuuming the carpet in my house, which is all carpet, and a few other things as well. So after getting home, I did laundry, vacuumed, and cleaned the bathroom as well. I also organized a few other things. It only took me like an hour and a half to do everything, and then I was going to cook some food. I had a recipe that I saved on my phone and I was going to try. However, I realized then that I couldn't find my phone. Obviously, I didn't have it when I was cleaning and stuff. Normally, I would have left it on the coffee table in the living room, or sometimes I left it on the couch. When I looked in both of those places, though, I couldn't find it. I was not worried until I looked in the entire kitchen, and it wasn't there either. I went into the bathroom and my bedroom as well, and I knew it wasn't there, but I looked anyways. After not finding it at all, I wondered if I lost it somewhere at work or something. But then I remembered that I had my phone shortly after arriving back at my house. I had texted one of my friends, so I knew that it had to be around here somewhere. I took all of the cushions off of my couch, and it wasn't there. I basically turned the entire place upside down, but the phone just wasn't anywhere. This really puzzled me. I did not have a house phone, or any other phone, so I couldn't call to see where it was. The last place that I decided to look was the basement. I had an unfinished basement which I really never used. There were all kinds of pipes and beams down there, and I also stored several large boxes and other items. I kept my vacuum down there, but just next to the base of the stairs, so I had only gone down there earlier just to grab the vacuum and then put it back. Maybe, just maybe, on some slim crazy chance, it was down there. I mean, I didn't know where else it would be. I turned on the light and then started to head down the stairs. The light did not do a whole lot, and it only lit up one measly bulb near the base of the stairs. After walking down, I looked on the floor next to the vacuum, but saw nothing. I was about to turn and head back upstairs, but then heard a noise. I also thought that I saw some movement out of the corner of my eye. It was mostly out of my sight, and also in a darker area of the basement. When I heard this, I stopped and turned to look in the direction of it. That's when I saw a man come into my view from behind a large box. He was really creepy looking, and I honestly couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was a ways away, and I was so shocked for a second or two that I didn't know how to react. The man then stood up and actually started walking towards me. I then turned and bolted up the stairs like my life depended on it. I made it up to the top and left my basement. Then I slammed the door shut behind me and ran for my front door. I did not stop until I had made it all the way outside. During this, I didn't think at all.
It was really all reaction. I just wanted to get out of my house. After leaving, I realized that I hadn't grabbed my keys or anything at all. Obviously, I didn't have my phone, so I couldn't call the police, and I couldn't get in my car either. I also didn't want to go back inside my house, so I ran to a neighbor's. I didn't go next door because I thought the guy might run outside after me, so instead, I ran several doors down and then knocked on the front door of that house. I didn't know who they were, but I just hoped that they would answer. Luckily, after about 30 seconds, they did. I asked them to call the police and then told them what was happening. They agreed to call the police, and we both waited on their front step and watched my house. We saw no sign of anybody leaving. I wasn't sure if the guy had already gone out or if he was still inside. The police were really quick to respond though, and got there probably within 2 minutes. I went back over with my neighbor and met an officer there. The police then entered my house as we waited outside. They came out a while later with the same man that I had seen in my basement. He had still been in the house. In fact, he was found hiding in my basement, and on him he had my cell phone in his pocket. I was able to get my phone back, but the whole thing really creeped me out a lot. I'm not sure when or how he got my phone. The only thing that I can think of is that he was already in my house when I got back from work. Then he might have came upstairs without my knowledge and took the phone and went back down. How he got in the house and when he got in the house, I also don't know. Maybe I simply forgot to lock my front door, or maybe he entered through a window. There were no signs of a break-in. Either way, since that experience, I bought security cameras, and I'm always sure to make sure that my doors are locked. This happened to me when I was in college. It was during my second year at my university. I lived in a small house which I shared with my roommate Thomas. The university I went to is rather large, and I think has about 20,000 total students. This took place sometime during the first semester. I remember that one day I went on Instagram and saw that I had a new follower. I clicked on the profile, and it was a girl named Rhonda. She had my school initials in her profile, as well as what I assumed would be her graduating year. She was also followed by 2 people that I knew from college. None of my really close friends, but some guys that I knew who they were and followed them. I realized that Rhonda must have went to my school, and I followed her back. On her profile, she didn't have too many pictures, a few selfies and some pictures of her dog. That was about it. After following her back, I went on with things and didn't think much of it. A few days went by. Then, one day, I noticed that Rhonda liked all of my pictures on Instagram. Now, I had about 40 posts or so, dating all the way back to my early years of high school. She liked every single photo, and I found that nice, but also a little bit random and odd. I thought that maybe she liked me or something. She didn't comment on anything or send me any messages though. Now, several more days went by after this. Then one night, Thomas was studying at a classroom and I was at home by myself. There was then a knock on the door. It was probably about 9 o'clock at night, and I wasn't expecting anybody and had no clue as to who it was. I had been in my room, so I didn't hear the knock very well. I got up and went out into the hallway, and then I heard another knock. But I realized then that the knocking was coming from the back door of the house, not even the front door. Now this was really strange. I walked over to the back door and looked out the window. When I did, I saw a girl standing there. It was Rhonda, but at first I didn't recognize her because I had only seen some selfies of her on Instagram. I don't think that I had ever seen her in person before. As I was standing by the door, she tried opening it up. Then I opened up the back door and said hi to her. I then asked her what she was doing here. She asked me if she could come inside. I had a bad feeling about it. Something about her was sort of creeping me out. Maybe it was the fact that she showed up unannounced to my back door at 9 o'clock at night. And by the way, she had no way of knowing where I lived. I asked her how she knew where my house was. She just asked to come inside again. I really didn't want her to. So instead, I told her that I was really busy with homework and I had to get back to it. She just stood there for a moment looking disappointed. Then she said that she was just going to go and walked off sort of angrily. I was glad that she was going, but more confused than anything. After she left, I went back inside and went into my room. Then I blocked Rhonda on Instagram. I felt that she had crossed the line by showing up unannounced like that. When Thomas got back home, I asked him if he knew Rhonda at all. He said no. I showed him her picture, and he still didn't recognize her. I told him what happened, and he was just as confused as I was. I was hoping that maybe he had known Rhonda, and she asked him for the address or something. But the fact that he didn't made it that much more creepy and weird. The very next night, I was pulling a late-night session of homework. I had some stuff due at 11:59 p.m. I was trying to get it done at the last moment. It was probably like 11:30, and I was almost done, when I heard Thomas call me from the living room. He was in there watching TV, and I asked him what he wanted. Then he told me that there was a girl standing at the front door. I knew who it was. I got up and walked out into the living room. I looked out the front door to see Rhonda just standing there, but she didn't knock on the door or anything. She appeared to look over and notice me. Then she turned and ran off. It was the creepiest thing ever. I went back and finished my homework and then joined Thomas watching TV in the living room. We kept glancing out the windows to see if she would come back, but luckily she didn't. After that, I never saw her again. I remember I asked Thomas to look her up on Instagram months later in the school year. She had a few more pictures then, and appeared to still attend our university. I still don't know what she was doing. It was really creepy behavior though.
I went shopping one quiet night last year. It was later at night, but my local grocery store was still open, and they're always open pretty late. I think it was about 11 p.m., and what I liked about shopping at that time was how quiet things were. On that night in particular, I saw a couple of other shoppers, but not many at all. The store was rather large, and had just about any kind of groceries you could want. I started out near the produce, and then started going down one aisle after another with my cart. There were a lot of things that I needed to get, but with the store being nearly empty, I was able to shop rather fast. I had gotten to one of the middle aisles in the store, and I don't remember exactly what was in it, but I had been shopping for probably 20 minutes and was getting close to being done. I was the only person in that aisle, and the store was quiet. Just a soft volume of music played across the store speakers. Out of nowhere, I heard a loud crash from the next aisle over from mine. I decided to walk over and check out what happened out of curiosity. It had sounded like a bunch of things falling off the shelf. I left my cart there where it was and walked over to the next aisle over. When I got there, I first noticed somebody sprinting out of the aisle at the other end. They then went out of sight within a second, and I only saw the back side of them, but it appeared to be a man. Then I saw the damage that he had caused. A bunch of items laid across the aisle on the ground. It was like somebody had pushed them all onto the floor. Whoever had done it was gone, so I took it upon myself to put the items back on the shelf. It didn't take too long, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. There was probably about 15 items or so that had been knocked over. This had been a pretty strange thing, but when I was done, I just returned to my cart in the next aisle over. Then I continued my shopping. Like I said, I was close to being done, and I just had to get a few things from the dairy department. I made my way over there, seeing only one other customer along the way. When I arrived at the dairy, I was getting yogurt and noticed another customer. It was a man, wearing jeans and a gray shirt. He was standing around in the far back corner of the store. I didn't pay much attention and kept on what I was doing. But then, something crazy happened. I saw the man moving towards this display that the store had of a drink product. The guy walked right over to it and then shoved the display, causing it to fall over. All of the cans of the drink fell down, and it caused another loud noise. Drinks went everywhere, but luckily, none of them broke open or spilled. I found this to be really strange, and also realized that this was probably the same man who had caused the other mess in the other aisle. I figured it would be a good idea to stay away from him. After the man knocked the display over, he walked at a fast pace in another direction. I finished up getting the last few items that I was going to get, and in that time, I saw an employee of the store walk over and see the mess. He saw me as the only other customer in the area and asked me if I saw what had happened. I told him the story and mentioned the incident in the other aisle as well. The employee shook his head and then walked over to go clean things up. I went into another direction to go check out. I got to the empty checkout lane at one of the 3 check lanes still open in the store. Soon I had paid for everything and was on my way. I left the store and headed to my car in the quiet parking lot. When I had made it fairly close to my vehicle, I started to hear footsteps behind me. They were moving at a faster pace, so I turned around to see, and when I did, I saw the same guy who had knocked over all the stuff inside the store. He was walking aggressively in my direction. It seemed as though he wanted something with me, but I didn't know what. I kept walking to my car, but there was no way I was going to make it before he got to me. When I had just about reached the backside of my car, the footsteps were right there, so I stopped and turned around. Now I was face to face with the man. He stopped and stood there across from me, the only thing between us being my shopping cart. I said hi to the man, not knowing what else to do. The guy responded by demanding the keys to my car. He told me that he needed them. This really surprised me, and I told the guy no. The guy then reached forward and grabbed my shopping cart from the sides. He then proceeded to knock the shopping cart over, spilling all of the grocery bags onto the pavement. As the cart fell over, I turned and ran for the front door of my car. The man had actually created a bit of an obstacle for himself. I pushed the unlock button on the keys of my car only when I was right outside of the driver's door. Then I opened the door and hopped in. I locked it immediately after. The man got there just seconds later and tried opening my door. He then started aggressively banging on the window. I started the engine and backed out as fast as possible. I actually backed into my shopping cart, which was laying on the ground still. Then I sped away, leaving the man standing there. When I was out of the parking lot and on the road, I called the police. I reported the whole incident and let them know that the man was still in the parking lot. Unfortunately, all of my groceries were left at the store. There was no way I was going back there, and I had to go shopping again the next day. At the end of the day, though, I'm just happy that the man didn't catch me.